back to the garage. So if you notice, I've changed the thumbnail on my channel, and it's basically a picture of this garage sign that my wife purchased for me for my birthday. It's been hanging up there for about 4 or 5 months, and I've just realized I never posted a video on it. So these are customizable signs. They're made out of aluminum. You can get pretty much within reason whatever you want on it. And what I'll do is I'll leave a description of where it was made, and if you wanted to do something like that on your own. All right, so latest update is bought a couple of other flip sleds. Talk about the big green one, the big Incredible Hulk. So that's a 2001 Arctic Cat ZRT 800. Has 1,300 miles on it. Get you in there real quick. Yeah, so 1,300 miles. There will be more on this in the next video. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do maintenance on this, and I'll get more into that on its own video. So then also picked up this flip sled. Last one we had in here was very similar. It was a 1999 Indy 500 carb, and so we went ahead and rehabbed that, and we sold it. And we actually picked up the Arctic Cat and this Indy Classic from the same people. So this one has 2,200 miles, I believe, 2,100. So this sled does run. I already had it on the running on the auxiliary tank. But what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go through the maintenance on this and talk about removing the airbox and carbs, syncing the carbs, doing the slide heights and everything else, because I think there's always a little bit of confusion as far as how you set up the free play and do the carbs and everything else. So with that being said, let's get to it. Let's get to work. All right, so this is a 1998 Indy 500 Classic, and it has the Indy 500 Fuji Twin. This engine is very common. Polaris used it pretty much all the way through the 90s and the early 2000s. There are a million of these out there, as well as the 440s. But the maintenance on these particular engines is pretty easy. It's pretty basic. And this is a Evolve chassis, so it's very easy to work on this because of the removable panels. It gives you a lot of access on both sides. But so again, this is a flip sled. We're not going to keep it, so we're going to go through it and make sure it's all set to go before we sell it and send it down the road. And you want to make sure whoever buys this is going to be having a good time during the winter and not struggling with it. All right, so what I've done is, after we brought it home, we checked the compression and spark and all the basic things before we load it up on the trailer. And what I did is I just took, my auxiliary tank, and this is very easy to do on these 500s because the fuel pump is located right on the airbox. You just remove the line coming from the tank, put the line from your auxiliary tank into the pump, pull it over, and then it'll just run off that tank, and then while you're kind of proving things out. Because the pickup line in the tank is rotted out and that needs to be replaced. We'll go into that as well. So while we do this, we're going to pull the airbox. We'll pull the carbs off. I'll give a high level review of the carb cleaning process. I'm not going to go into a lot of details because I've done this probably about 4 or 5 times already. So it's really not a sense of kind of repeating myself. But once we do that, we'll get the carbs back on there. I'll show you how you set the heights, the idle screws, and the air jets and everything else. So let's get to work. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the side panels on this Evolve chassis, and it's held on by this screw, which is the tie down strap holder. There's one right here, 2, 3, and 4. So go ahead and take those off. Now that we have the panels removed, what we wanna do now is start removing the airbox. And before we can remove the airbox, we got to take the pump off of it. And it's just held on by 2 screws. There's one there and there's one there. Pop that off. And then the top of the airbox is held on by these clips. And then I want to say there's 8 of them all the way around. Just go ahead and stick a flathead screwdriver in there and pop those off too. All right, now that you got the top of the airbox off, you're going to go ahead and remove the 2 screws that are holding the lower part of the airbox on. And then there's the other screw. So go ahead and pop out those 2 Phillips screws. And then we're gonna rock it back off the carbs, and then it's gonna come right out. Okay, now with the airbox removed, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start removing the carbs. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna separate the fuel line from both. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take some pliers, right angle pliers, squeeze that clamp and pull it out. All All right, now with the fuel lines removed, we're gonna go ahead and remove the caps from the carbs. But before we do that, I'm gonna spray down the adjusting part of the throttle cable with some penetrating fluid, and I'll explain why when we get to that point. So just spray these down, and you're gonna let these soak, right? So when it comes back to putting the carbs back on, those should be all set to go. But all right, so the caps have been removed from the tops of the carbs. Go ahead, loosen up the clamps on the carb boots, and then we're gonna pop the carbs out of the boots. I'm gonna leave the choke cables attached for now, and I'm gonna remove them once they're out of the boots because it's just easier to get at the choke cables while the carbs are kind of floating around versus while they're in there. All right, now with the carbs out of the boots, go ahead and take your 12mm wrench and then just back up or back off the cable, and then just pull it out. And if everything is going well, it'll slide right out of the board just like that. All right, so we have the carbs on the bench. First thing you want to do is go ahead and remove the plug on the bottom of the bowl. That's the water trap, and that's held on by a 17mm nut. And then just remember there's gonna be gas in it, so dump it into a container. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove these 4 screws that hold the bowl on. So we've removed the bowl and put the screws in from the bowl in our little carb cleaner can, right? So that's what I use. You can buy that at any parts store for like 20 bucks, I think. So even though this machine only has 2,200 miles, you never know what you're gonna find when you open it up, and this is a perfect example, right? So on the bowl, there should be 2 retention caps for the floats. So, you know, when the floats come up, there's no chance for them to fall off. Those are gone. But you know what? It's really not that big of a deal. I think I do have a carb with those retention caps, because if you look, see, you see the little notch where they're supposed to clip in, but no big deal. And then if you look at the floats themselves, you can see where the water line was in the bottom of the bowls just by the sediment that's on it. So we're gonna clean those up. And the next thing is we're gonna start removing the needle and seat, which is underneath the float arm, and then the main jet. So the main jet is just held on by I think it's a 6mm hex. So go ahead and take that off, and then we'll take that off, put that in the can, then we'll remove the pilot, and then we'll remove the needle and seat. We've taken the main jet and we've taken the pilot jet out. So to get the pilot, what you want to do is just find a long, skinny screwdriver, stick it in there, and when you go to take it out, just press down on the pilot jet so you don't strip it off the little engagement slot. Just make sure you have a good grip on it. And then what we're doing now is we're taking off the float arm, and the float arm is just removed by removing this pin from the float tower, and that is done by just taking a little bit of a punch, putting it on one side, tapping it and driving it out, and then you slide the pin out, and then that'll come right out. And then we're gonna go ahead and take the needle and seat out, take a look at that, and we're gonna take the seat out. All right, so let's go ahead and take that out. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take out the air screw. So typically these should be from Polaris, 3/4 to 1 turn from lightly seated. So what I always do before I take them out, I always run them back down to see what they actually were. So that's a half, 3/4. All right, so 3/4 return. So that was pretty much right on spec. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and take those out, and then we're gonna put that in the can as well, and then we're gonna throw the entire body and everything else into the All right, so we have all the internals and the body sitting in the solution. I'll typically just let that sit for about half an hour. And what I'm gonna do is, typically I don't put the bowl in there. I don't know, because for the most part, I'll just clean that by hand, blow it out with compressed air, spray it out with some carb cleaner. I'll clean the floats and everything else while that's soaking, and then I'll also take apart the other carb. So at this point, we've taken all the parts out of the solution. I've blown it out, and then I've given it a final rinse of some carb cleaner. Don't use brake cleaner because the brake cleaner can be caustic on some plastics and everything else. So always use carb cleaner. And at this point, I've already gone through the pilot jet and the main jet and make sure that they weren't blocked. They're all clear. and we're just, at this point, we're ready to go do the reassembly. It's pretty much the same thing as the disassembly, so just remember, all these parts are brass. It doesn't take a lot of torque to break these things, so just remember, go easy on it. So we have the carb reassembled. We have the bowl back on it. So the last thing you want to do, and I think a lot of people just forget all about this, and this is probably the most important thing to do when you put it back together, is clean out this water trap. Because you got to remember, this is the lowest point of the carburetor, and this is designed to catch all the shit and junk and whatever that's in the fuel system that makes it past the filter. And if you don't clean this out and you go ahead and put this back in here, and all you're going to do is basically just put dirt and junk back into the system. So just spray it down with some carb cleaner, blow it out with compressed air, and make sure it's nice and clean before you put it back in. And that's essentially the last step before we go and reinstall the carbs. So we have the carbs back in the sled, kinda. And what I want to show you is very typical of what will happen to these machines over the years, all right? So if we look, the PTO carb is on the left, the mag is on the right. So I'm gonna slowly hit the throttle, and if you look, the mag is moving before the PTO, right? So that could be caused by a couple things. It could be caused by the idle adjustment screw being turned in on one side heavier than the other, or it could be the throttle cables are not set correctly, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this and how to correct this and make sure that your carbs in sync, and you make sure that they're opening at the same time, right? So this one's actually pretty bad, right? All right, so let's go ahead and we're gonna grab a couple drill bits. I'm gonna show you what you need to do. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna reset these carbs back to stock, right? Factory settings, right? So what you have to remember is how this thing works, right? So you have the throttle cable coming into the body, and basically that draws the slide up and down, all right? And then you have the idle adjustment screw, which will, when you turn it in, it basically it hits a ramp, and then it will drive the slide up in the bore and increase the throttle on that cylinder, right? So since we have a difference between the two, what we need to do is we need to reset the slide first by using the cable, right? You don't do it with the idle adjustment screw, right? So what we're gonna do is we've loosened up the jam nut on the throttle cable, we backed it off, and what we're gonna now do is we're gonna back these, the idle adjustment screw is completely out, and if you saw, the slide came down in the bore, right? So what we're gonna do now is, the way you wanna set the slide height is, you're gonna grab 2 drill bits, right? Put them right here. One is a 7/32, which is 227,000 or 224 thousandths in diameter. And then you have a 1/4 inch, which is 250 thousandths in diameter, right? The first one we're gonna use is to set the height of the slide on the cable, right? So we wanna go smaller, right? Because what we wanna do is we're gonna set the slide using a drill bit to 224 thousandths, right? And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna set the final height to 250 using the idle adjustment screw. So what this is gonna do is you have to remember Polaris wants some slack in the cables. So when you know that the throttle is at rest, there's no slack on the cables. The slides are all the way down, and they're down because they're hitting on the idle adjustment screw. They're not being stopped by the slack of the cable or being too tight on the cable itself, right? So we're gonna take the 7/32, we're gonna slide it down through the throat of the carb, and we're gonna take the cable and we're gonna screw it in or up or down until we have drag on the drill bit. So this is the 7/32 drill bit. It's 224 thousandths, and I'm putting it in the throat of the carb, and I can't get it in the slide. So with the jam nut loose, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna basically back out the throttle cable, and what this is gonna do, it's gonna start picking up the slide, because as you screw the cable out, it's shortening the cable, right? So as we did that, the drill bit is now passing through, right? So I feel a little bit of drag on the drill bit on the carb slide, right? So what I'm talking about is take it and basically put it in there, and it's just lifting the slide up ever so slightly. Now we have that height set, right? What we're gonna do is we're gonna run the jam screw back down, and we're gonna tighten that up. So we do not want that cable to move. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take an 8mm wrench, just put it there. We're not gonna move it, right? We just wanna prevent it from spinning. And then we're gonna take a 10mm, and we're just gonna lock that down, right? So there you go. Now that the cable is set, now we're gonna take the 1/4" drill bit, and we're gonna do the same thing, because if you hit it, if you try to put it in there, it shouldn't move at all. Now we're gonna screw in the idle adjustment screw, right, until it hits the throttle slide. And what's gonna happen is it's gonna make contact, and it just raised up the slide. Now we're at 250, right? 1/4" on that side, right? So the reason why you use a smaller drill bit is in the event that you need to adjust the idle, you have enough play between the cable and the idle adjustment screw where you can go up and down, or down, really, and you're not gonna bottom out on the throttle cable, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the same thing on the other one, get this carb set. Okay, so we just did the magneto side. So if we look, they're pretty much dead even. They move exactly at the same time, and the idle is set at 250 thousandths. All right. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and reinstall the carbs. We're gonna leave the air box off for now because we gotta do some other work, but we'll see how we did. So there you go, 1500 RPM, right where it wants to be. It seems pretty good. That initial tip-in, again, it's probably about 55 degrees today, so it's pretty warm. Not the best to set the carbs at. But again, so we're at 3/4 on the air screw, 250 on the slide heights, and we're right on the idle. So as far as, you know, really getting into the carbs, you know, that's where you would mess around with the clip height on the needles and everything else. But right now, it sounds pretty good, all right? So I hope this explains what you need to do when you do work on the carbs, as far as cleaning them out and setting the carb height and everything else. Some people may think that there's black magic behind it. It's very confusing. But once you break it down, it is very simple. It's pretty basic and easy to do once you get the concept of what you need to do. All right, if there's any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and throw them in the comments box. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day. See ya.